This is Fred the Dead. He's going to help us learn about respiration today. His head is a little bit small for his body, but we can get a good idea. So here's his rib cage. It's attached to this vertebral column. You can't see it, but there should be little segments in here that all fit together like little puzzle pieces. There's 7 cervical vertebrae, those are the neck ones. 12 thoracic vertebrae, those are for the thorax, that's this part of the body. Then there's 5 lumbar that are below the rib, 5 sacral, and a coccyx at the very bottom. The ribs help us breathe. This is the sternum bone, one in the middle, and on either side it's the same color, but these are cartilage that are attaching the ribs to the sternum in the middle. So the ribs attach to the vertebrae in the back. There's a side of the vertebrae is called the transverse process. So the ribs attach to the vertebrae on the side. And then this point, what you can feel of the spine, like if you ran your hand down somebody's back, is called the spinous process. When we're breathing, our lungs are inside your rib cage. And here's his tiny lungs. These are too small for his rib cage. This is the right lung, and you can tell because it has 3 lobes. And this is the left lung, and it has 2 lobes, and it has a spot here where the heart would go. And that's the cardiac impression. This down here is a diaphragm impression. That's where the diaphragm rests. The diaphragm is what helps us breathe. It's the muscle, the main muscle in inspiration, and it attaches in the body. It's kind of a bowl shape like this, and it goes up. It goes this way, and it attaches to, it has a sternal attachment and then a costal attachment. Costal means having to do with the ribs. So it attaches around the edge of the rib on both sides, and then it attaches to the spine in the back. And the diaphragm works kind of like a bellows. So it's down here, and when it contracts, it pulls it flat. And when it pulls it flat, then the lungs get pulled down. So they're here, and when this gets pulled flat, then the lungs come down, and it creates a negative pressure, and the air rushes in. And the other part, the other muscle that helps with inspiration are the external intracostals. External meaning on the outside, intracostal meaning in between the ribs. And they are on the outside, but they run in between the ribs, and they go from the top of the rib to the bottom of the rib to the top of the next rib, kind of like that. And they run all the way around on both sides, from the back, from the spine, vertebral column, all the way almost to the front, but not quite. And they pull that rib cage up. Technical difficulties. So the rib cage, gravity and the tension on the ribs makes the lungs go down. And then when we inhale, then the ribs go up, making this space bigger. And then when we exhale, gravity and the pull of the ribs wanting to go back to the regular space makes them go down. So we breathe in and breathe out, and breathe in and breathe out. And of course, that works in conjunction with this diaphragm down here, which will pull flat so the air gets sucked in, and then it will relax. And if we are, that's if we're passively breathing, just regular breathing. If we are actively trying to expel air, then we also use muscles called the internal intracostals. And those go from, I'm going to move this external intracostal. They go in this direction and they attach from the bottom, that's their point of origin, and then their point of insertion is on the bottom side of the next rib up. And so they pull down. They're going to compress the rib cage back down to its resting state. So as he's sitting here, if this direction was up, this direction was down, then gravity would be pulling the rib cage down, as well as these internal intracostals are helping him exhale. So his lungs will compress, the diaphragm relaxes and goes back up, the body, his abdominal muscles are going to compress and push his abdominal viscera. All his organs will push up here if he is actively trying to push as much air out as he can. If he is just breathing in and out, then it's just gravity that's pulling down and the natural recoil on those ribs. This part of the rib cage where the ribs are attached has cartilage, and cartilage is a tissue that's really stretchy as well as tough. It'll come back to the same spot. So those ribs have some give so that they can flex like that. They're not some of the bones in our skull, they're not gonna bend and give because their connection is not the same kind. They don't have cartilage up there. There isn't cartilage up there. On the rib cage, these top ribs, this is not the correct number of ribs, but the top ribs are true ribs and they attach to the sternum. And then there's false ribs, that these ones on the bottom, that attach only to the cartilage. And there's 3 of those, I believe. And then there's 2 floating ribs that don't attach to the rib cage at all. They're just support. They're in the back. Oh, and there's 2 nerves that make this diaphragm work. They're called phrenic nerves. And this part, the diaphragm has a tendon in the middle that these muscles pull on to pull it flat. This hole here in the middle is the foramen vena cava, I believe, and it's where the vein, because this diaphragm completely separates the bottom half of the body from the top half. And so in order for blood to get back and forth, there has to be a hole in this diaphragm. And this hole is for the veins, for the vein to go back to the heart. And this hole is the esophageal hiatus, and it's for the esophagus, for the food to come down the esophagus. The esophagus connects with the stomach through that hole. And then this back hole, which would of course be by the spine and the most protective, is the aortic hiatus, and that's where the aorta, or rather where there's blood flow to the bottom half of the body. The oxygen-rich blood flow would go through that hiatus right there. I think that's about what I can share with this guy. I've learned a lot and appreciated having a chance to learn about how our lungs work. So thank you so much.